You know about those 10 catastrophes sent upon all the Egyptians? I'm not talking about just upon the king who refused to obey Moses. Because if you believe all this stuff actually happened, well, they'd have to be horrific, to say the least, upon all of Egypt. Imagine the water you drink, bathe, wash your laundry, all turns into a river of nasty and foul blood. Then there are all those slimy frogs and the biting insects. Not even your livestock is spared, as Yahweh sends his pestilence on the poor animals as well. Yahweh then told Moses to take a handful of soot and scatter it all over the land in order to produce painful boils on the bodies of every single Egyptian, even the innocent animals. And how about the next event, a thunderstorm of rain and fire, the worst in all of Egypt so far. Then came the day of locusts, who devoured every bit of food, even the hail left over from the storm. Don't you think that that was quite enough? Well, then there came the darkness, a 3-day event. Finally, Yahweh decreed that every firstborn of the Egyptians, the ones who survived the storms, the boils, the lack of food, which had been devoured by the locusts, they would all die. And so it came to pass. Or did it? There was not one single record of any of those damn plagues. Now, had such a phenomenon occurred, they would have been documented by the Egyptians, who did not hesitate to write down their woes as well as their triumphs. Fortunately, we have an abundance of late Bronze Age writings, both engraved on stone and on papyrus, which has survived in storage for thousands of years in the dry Egyptian climate. We have royal records and even records of commercial transactions which can be useful in detecting any interruption to their way of life. However, no Egyptian record of the biblical Exodus has ever been found. 1 King tells us that the Exodus began 480 years before the 4th year of the King Solomon's reign, which on the biblical timeline would place the Exodus around 1446 BCE. This means that the Israelites should have been well established in the Promised Land by 1400 BC. Right down to the 13th century BCE, we know the fate of every pharaoh, but not one of them drowned in pursuit of the Israelites. There was no record that would lead to the conclusion that all the Egyptian firstborn sons were suddenly killed. You think they ought to mention that. No record of the loss of a large number of slaves. No record of the theft of all that jewelry. No records of the loss of an entire army in pursuit of escaping slaves. Along with the evidence that there was no invasion of Canaan, the only rational conclusion is that the biblical Exodus never really happened. Hence, nor did those 10 plagues come to pass. Remember, it's intended as a symbolic story, used to establish a history, and this telling of the story can only be found in the writings of the Jewish scribes, who began the business of setting down old tribal tales during the exile in Babylon. It's all part of a foundation myth and the foundation of Judaism. But look at all the foundation myths from all the cultures across the world.
Well, we know that the Jewish scribes, whoever they were, that took all their oral traditions and all the stories that they learned while they were in Babylon, and the creation story, we know that both the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom creation story, we know there's 2 stories in Genesis, they both came from Babylon, but they were interpreted just like the telephone game. One saw it one way, they wrote their deity in it, the one saw it the other way and wrote their deity into it.
Yep.
But what the truth of these myths are is they accepted that creation myth as real, as true. Yeah. But they said, but our God had to do it because he's God. Okay? Yeah. So they put these stories out truthfully. That wasn't that they stole those stories from the Babylonian captivity. It was that they accepted them as truth. And they added the rest of the truth to the story.
Sure.
Yeah. And so have we.